In the 80s, studios would greenlight literally anything. Killer slugs, satanic computers, aliens that looked like giant naked babies. And most of these movies were so Hollywood pretended they never happened. Evilspeak hit right at the peak of satanic panic. This was when parents were convinced heavy metal and Dungeons and Dragons were literally recruiting kids into devil worship. The filmmakers saw that hysteria and decided to make a movie where a computer helps a kid summon Satan. The movie follows a military school kid named Stanley Cooper Smith who gets bullied relentlessly. One day, while being punished for something he didn't even do, he stumbles across a book about performing the Black Mass. So he steals a computer from the school lab to research the ritual further. And when the bullies come after him, Stanley breaks and decides to use the computer to help him summon Satan. The director, Eric Weston, had only made one other film before this. He was 31 and basically made Evilspeak as his to every person who'd ever bullied him in school. Even now, with dated effects, there are scenes that are genuinely hard to watch, especially if you care about animals. This one doesn't mess around. Stanley gets his revenge, and it's not pretty. Garden slugs get exposed to toxic waste and start killing people in a small town. A health inspector has to stop them. That's the pitch, and somehow it got made into a full movie. Slugs was based on a novel by British horror writer Sean Hudson. Somehow the book was a hit in Spain, which is why a Spanish production company picked it up and shot most of it in New York with local actors. The director was a guy who'd already made a name for himself with another creature feature called Pieces. His approach to horror was basically go as extreme as possible with whatever you have. So when the script called for a guy to deal with a slug in his glove, they didn't do subtle. The whole sequence ends with him chopping his arm off and his house exploding. The movie made almost nothing at the box office, but became a huge rental hit. It was exactly the kind of thing you'd grab at the video store because the cover looked insane and you were curious how bad it could be. Turns out, pretty bad. But that was the whole point. Motel Hell opened the decade with a question nobody asked. What if farmers ran a motel and used their guests as crops? The movie follows this brother and sister who own a motel and a farm. They lure people to the motel, kidnap them, and literally plant them in a garden. Like vegetables, they bury people up to their necks in the soil and keep them there until they're ready to be harvested and smoked like meat. The movie was actually trying to be a dark comedy, but most audiences missed that because the horror elements were too intense. Rory Calhoun, who played the killer farmer Vincent, was 58 years old and had been a leading man in westerns back in the 50s. By 1980, his career was basically over, so he took this weird role and just went all in. By the end, he's a chainsaw-wielding pigman fighting his own brother. It made about $5 million on a tiny budget, then lived forever on cable TV. This movie features a character named Harry Potter. I'm not kidding. This came out in 1986, years before J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter, and this kid's name is Harry Potter Jr. Harry and his family move into a new apartment building. Immediately, his little sister Wendy gets possessed by an evil troll. Then Harry meets a witch who tells him there's an ancient war between fairies and humans happening inside his building. So now Harry Potter Jr. has to save his family and everyone in the building before they all get turned into mythical creatures. The whole thing is completely insane, and it takes itself totally seriously. The kid playing Harry Potter Jr. was Noah Hathaway, who'd already starred in The Never-Ending Story 2 years earlier. This was supposed to be his next big fantasy film. It wasn't. He actually quit acting for 8 years after this. If old toys creep you out, skip this one entirely. Dolls was shot in Italy in 1985, and it's about a group of people who take shelter in a mansion during a storm. The main character is a little girl named Judy who ends up in a creepy house with a weird old couple and their collection of antique dolls. The dolls come alive and start attacking people. It was directed by Stuart Gordon, who'd made Reanimator the year before. Reanimator was this massive underground hit that made Gordon's name in horror, so Empire Pictures basically told him to make whatever he wanted next. He pitched a movie about killer dolls. The movie came out the same year as Child's Play, which did the killer doll concept with a much bigger budget and became a franchise. Dolls made almost nothing and disappeared, but it's the one Stuart Gordon says he's most proud of because he got to make exactly the movie he wanted with zero studio interference. Sam Neill plays a spy who comes back to Berlin after being away for work. His wife Anna has been acting weird, so he figures she's having an affair. Turns out she is having an affair, but that's actually the least of his problems. Anna's got a second apartment, and when Sam finds out what she's keeping in there, things go completely off the rails. The body count in this movie is insane. There are scenes in possession that are so disturbing, so completely that the UK banned it for years. I'm talking full-on psychological breakdown stuff mixed with actual monster horror. But here's the wild part. Despite being banned and despite being absolutely unhinged, the movie won awards. Isabella Gianni, who played Anna, won Best Actress at Cannes. The film won the Palme d'Or at the 34th Cannes Film Festival. A guy named Kevin gets a job as a security guard at a film studio. First night on the job, he finds this old film vault that's been locked up and deserted, so naturally he opens it. Inside are some furry little goblin creatures from outer space, and Kevin just unleashed them on the world. The Hobgoblins have this power where they can make your deepest fantasies come to life, and then they use those fantasies to kill you, which sounds kind of cool until you see what the movie does with it. Kevin's crush is a girl named Amy. The Hobgoblins get to her and bring her fantasy to life. Turns out her deepest fantasy is becoming a stripper and dancing on stage at a sleazy club. The whole movie is like that. Just horny teenagers versus furry space goblins. Peak 80s B-horror. Randy Quaid plays a 1950s suburban father. His wife is played by Mary Beth Hurt. They've got a young son named Michael, and Michael is starting to suspect something is very wrong with his parents. He finds body parts hanging in the basement. Turns out his parents are cannibals and they've been feeding him human flesh this whole time. Parents became a cult classic over the years. People praised it for being this dark satire of 1950s American suburban life, but that doesn't change the fact that it's deeply messed up. The worst scene, and I mean the absolute worst, is when young Michael walks in on his parents having sex, except they're doing it in a pool of blood and human flesh. It's a black comedy, so it's playing some of this for laughs, but mostly it's just disturbing. The kind of movie that makes you wonder how it got made and who thought any of this was a good idea. Aliens that look like giant naked babies send murderous slug creatures to Earth. The slugs need hosts to survive, so they're trying to crawl into people's bodies. One of the first hosts gets captured pretty quickly. But years later, 2 college students accidentally release him, and all the slugs get out and start terrorizing the town. This was written and directed by Fred Decker, who later wrote The Predator. And despite the giant naked alien babies, it's actually kind of fun. It's got this teen horror comedy vibe going on, mixing aliens with zombies with campus slasher stuff. The movie scores 75% on Rotten Tomatoes, which for a film about murderous alien slugs is pretty impressive. It's completely bonkers, but it knows what it is and just commits to the bit. Clown-looking aliens show up from outer space. They're giant, they've got 4 fingers, they're covered in clown makeup, and they're here to harvest humans. They wrap people up in cotton candy cocoons or turn them into popcorn. The only way to kill them is by destroying their big red noses. But even when you do that, they eventually respawn as popcorn kernels. The entire movie is like this. Every scene is just another layer of insane clown nightmare fuel. These things are capturing people with balloon animals, using shadow puppets as weapons, and storing humans in giant popcorn bags. It's one of the wackiest horror films ever made, and it knows it. The filmmakers leaned all the way into the premise and created something so ridiculous it loops back around to being kind of genius.